right, we'll call this Committee of Adjustment meeting to order. Just before we get started this evening, I will go through the meeting protocols for tonight. This evening, we'll be hearing 3 applications on the agenda. So we will go through those applications one by one. Before we get started, the first order of business will be to ask if there's any conflicts of interest with any committee members with regards to the applications that are on the agenda this evening. Follow that, there'll be a request for any deferrals or withdrawals of applications. I know we do have one that we will address right away. The other ones I will confirm since we're virtual with each applicant as they come into the meeting. The Secretary Treasurer will read out each application that's on the agenda, followed by a brief staff report and description of the application. The applicant or the agent for the applicant will then introduce themselves, be brought into the meeting, have an opportunity to add any additional comments that they have at that time. Committee members will then have the opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they might have. And then following, we'll open it up to members of the public who wish to speak to an application. This evening, I do have a few delegations that have requested to speak to a couple of the different applications. So we will get to them in due course as we go through. Following public presentations, or maybe before I get to that, I will ask that members of the public who make or get brought into the meeting that they try to limit their comments to 10 minutes and ask any questions or comments that they have in that time frame, as they may not be allowed to come back again to speak to the same application. So if whatever you got to bring forward, please bring it forward in that time frame that's allotted to you. Following that, the applicant will also have an opportunity at the end to present any additional comments that they wish to offer. The committee then will present a decision in the form of a motion. The motion will be discussed and voted upon. If the vote is tied, a motion will be defeated and a new motion will be made until we have a decision. Notices of decision will only be provided to those persons who have left their name and addresses with the Secretary Treasurer and the Planning Division. If you haven't signed up for that or emailed Chris Rome at City of Hall, you can reach him right after the meeting or first thing in the morning at chris.rome, R-O-O-M-E, at portcolborne.ca, or you can call and leave a voice message at 905-835-2900, extension 205. Again, immediately following this meeting or first thing in the morning. In order to be advised of any possible local planning appeal tribunal hearings, you must request to be sent a copy of the committee's decision. So with that, that's the protocols for this evening. The first order of business, I will ask if anyone has any conflicts with any of the applications. Not seeing any. I will go to deferrals with regards to applications. I know I have received correspondence that application A33-21-PC in reference to 3475 Fire Lane 12. Staff has recommended that this application be deferred to our next meeting. So with that, I'll ask if I can get a mover or a seconder to that. Gary, Angie is the seconder. Any questions or comments on the deferral? Not seeing any. All those in favor? That'll be carried. So hopefully we'll get that back at our next meeting. So with that, I don't believe there's any further requests at this point in time. So Mr. Secretary, I'll ask you for the first application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first application then tonight is application, sorry, the wrong one. Application B18-21-PC, and in the matter of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13, Section 53(1), and in the matter of the lands legally known as Lot 29 on Plan 768 in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, located in the second density residential zone, municipally known as 664 King Street. And in the matter of an application by the agent Harry Kalintzakis on behalf of the owner Gabriella Guo for a severance under Section 53(1) of the Planning Act RSO 1990, Chapter P13, so as to permit the conveyance of Part 1 having a lot frontage of 20.32 meters on Charles Street and a lot area of 375.79 meters squared for a proposed semi-detached dwelling. Part 2 will retain a lot frontage of 18.50 meters on King Street with a lot frontage of 375.79 meters squared for a proposed semi-detached dwelling. Planning staff has reviewed the reference application and offer the following comments. Notice was circulated to the required agencies and members of the public on December 22nd, 2021, and as of January 7th, or as of today, rather, the following correspondence has been received. There are no comments on the proposed application from the engineering and the drainage superintendent, and the fire department has no objection to the proposed application. Given the information in the planning staff report, planning staff recommend that application B18-21-PC be granted subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds in triplicate for conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. And 2, that a final certification fee of $216 payable to the City of Port Colborne be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. For the following reasons: 1, the application conforms to the provincial policy statement, the policies of the Regional Official Plan, City of Port Colborne Official Plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the Zoning Bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. And 2, that this decision is rendered having regard to the provisions of subsection 5124 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP13. And that concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Can we bring in the applicant for this application, please?
Yep, right there. Unmute. Oh, hello.
Good evening.
Hi. Good evening.
Just for the record, just your name for the.
State your name. Well, my name is Gabriella.
Okay.
Gabriella Guo, yeah.
All right, very good. Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No.
All right. Do any members of the committee have any questions for the applicant? Not seeing any. I do know that we have one delegation that has requested to speak to this application. So with that, I will go to staff to bring in Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells, just for the record, name and address, and your mic is on mute.
Thank you, Your Honor. With regards to this, let me introduce myself. My name is Harry Wells. I am a property owner on Charles Street, adjacent to the proposed property development. That is immediate adjacent to it, to the east. I'm sorry, to the west. I have a couple of questions. The first question I have through you, Your Worship, to maybe Chris Rome or somebody from the planning department in regards to the application. And the question is, in 14.3, it states that there are no existing buildings or structures on the subject land. However, when you look at the site plan in the bottom left-hand corner, there is what's referred to as a shed. That shed has a square footage of 19.7 square meters. It meets the definition under the zoning bylaw of a building as it is a permanent structure with a floor, with walls, roof. And I was wondering why that, or wondering if the application should be amended to include that building structure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Wells. I'm not exactly sure what site plan you're referring to. The one on that was handed on the notice. There is no there is no shed identified on that sketch there. So I'm a little confused as to what you are referring to. Perhaps the owner of the property could shed a little light on that if there's any accessory structures on the property right now.
That's not actually a shed. I mean, it is a shed, like a garden shed. It has like a really thin metal structure walls. It has no foundation. It's about 1.5 meters tall, and we decided to keep it during construction to store our materials.
But it's not permanent.
It's not permanent, and I'm not sure about the square footage, but it definitely comes apart really easy. It's not a permanent building.
A drawing was provided to me from David Scholes in my first contact with him in regards to this. And on that drawing, it identifies the structure in question. And the fact that the owners of the property are admitting that there is a structure there, and that structure does satisfy in my opinion, satisfy the zoning bylaw definition of a building. So all I'm pointing out is that the application to be considered to be complete should identify that building.
If I might, to the owners, is that building going to remain, or is that going to be removed once construction is complete?
If it's still standing, we might keep it for just the garage. I mean, to keep the tools and stuff, but it's not hooked up to any utilities or any power or anything like that. It's just a garden shed made of, as I said, thin metal wall.
Sheets.
That's the one you can buy from Home Depot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And again, I say, it's my opinion that it does satisfy the definition of a building within the zoning bylaw, and therefore should be identified. If it is going to be removed, it should be identified that it will be removed and at what time that would be removed. A rough date on that, in my opinion, to make sure to ensure that the application is complete.
Okay.
Okay. Following from that, I have some further questions in regards to the identification of this building. The building in itself has 4 units in it. I am asking the question through you, Your Worship, to David Scholes or Chris Rome, with regards to if that building, as it is, meets the definition within the zoning bylaw of a fourplex.
David or Chris, just before you get to that, Mr. Wells, just before you go, you can just simply address me as the chair. I'd like to be promoted to some of those other roles, but unfortunately, I'm just a chair. So just a point of correction. Anyway, David or Chris, if you want to reply.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Wells. Planning staff did review the building permit when it was initially submitted to us, and we are satisfied that it does meet the requirements of the bylaw in that it is a semi-detached building with 2 accessory dwelling units in the basement there. In order for them to be recognized as accessory dwelling units, they are required to be less than 40% of the gross floor area of the primary unit. So of just one of the semi-detached units. So I believe, I'm probably going to be paraphrasing here a little bit, but the fourplex in our zoning bylaw would need to be 4 units of equal size. And they wouldn't be, in this case, the apartments are considered to be accessory, the key word being accessory there, to the primary dwelling unit. So planning staff were satisfied that those requirements were met, so we wouldn't consider this to be a fourplex, but rather a semi-detached with two accessory dwelling units.
Chair, I beg to differ. The zoning bylaw, and I'll read it word for word. Dwelling fourplex means a building that is divided vertically and horizontally into 4 dwelling units, each with an entrance, either independent or to the exterior or through a common vestibule. That is the definition in the zoning bylaw. This inference of 25%, this inference that that it's a duplex, a semi-duplex with an accessory building because the additional, the other space is less than is 40% of the floor plan. Those are not in the definition of a fourplex. When what I see here is that something is being read into the definition of a fourplex that is not in our zoning bylaw. If that's the case, then I would suggest that we should move forward to have the city modify the zoning bylaw to accommodate this dimension of quarter by quarter by quarter. There are numerous examples where a multiplex facilities within the city have varying degrees of percentages of floor space per unit, per living unit. So I find that this is a backdoor entryway into calling this a semi-detached duplex, since it meets the fourplex definition. And I'll leave it at that for right now. But I would love to hear planning's explanation as to why this does not meet the definition of a fourplex.
Just to your point, I think Mr. Roma has already explained his definition and their interpretation of the bylaw. The other thing I would also add is that we're not discussing the usage of these properties. We're simply discussing the severance into 2 particular properties. So as far as the usages are a separate issue and not part or germane to the severance here. So the severance is simply, they have a permit for a semi-detached dwellings, and they're just asking to split that building into 2 in accordance with the bylaw. And that's what we're here to discuss. Whether someone theoretically down the road comes and turns it into a 6plex on either side, that's a topic for a different day, but that's not what we're here to discuss today. It's simply the severance of this property into 2 down the common property boundary.
Your chair, there is a relevance as to the designation of the building in regards to the severance of the property into separate lots. And that is related to the relative setbacks of each part and parcel of the separation. So if this is a fourplex, it has a different requirement for setbacks. If it's a duplex, it has a different requirement of setbacks. So it does have relevance to the separation or the splitting of this property into 2 parts. And that's why I brought it forward. And I'll leave it at that point, but I would like to also continue with my my questions in regards to where is what street is the front of the building residing at?
Again, to your point, it's not really germane what the street address is. Currently, it's designated as on King Street simply because the current lot before severance is fronted on King Street. That is the frontage. That is the address that is municipally designated to this property currently. What it becomes afterwards is a matter of whatever the city decides to call it, or mutual agreement to whatever the street address is, whether it's Charles Street or King Street. I don't see that being germane to a severance of these 2 properties.
Well, the severance of the property, part 1 would end up having a frontage because it has no association with King Street whatsoever, of 4.04 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a frontage of 6.5 meters. So the relevance there is that in at least there should be a request for a variance on the frontage of part 1 to allow the separation of this into 2 separate lots. That's my basis of it. Anyway, those are my comments, and I believe that part one of this severance will end up having a Charles Street address, which is therefore a severance or a setback of 6.5 rather than 4.04. And to allow this to be separated into two parcels of legal entities, then the parcel one should be required to have a minor variance on the front yard to be equal to the distance from the front line to the front of that building.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything further you'd like to add?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Chris or David, if I might, to that last point, typically when severing lots, if there's additional variances required for the either remnant lot or the new lot, those are defined as part of the consent application. To Mr. Wells's point, is that a requirement here? And if not, why not?
To you, Mr. Chair, this is David here. So I think what the question here is whether the semi-detached building can be split. And I don't know if you have the zoning bylaw in front of you or not, but basically section 6.5K states that notwithstanding the provisions of section 6.5, nothing shall prevent the splitting of any lot on which a semi-detached dwelling is erected in two parts, divided in part by the center line of the common wall or party wall separating the dwelling units, in such dwelling provided that each unit shall have a minimum lot area of 0.02 hectares. So what that means is that if the semi-detached building is constructed in conformity with section 6.5, which when we reviewed the building permit it was, that nothing in the bylaw can prevent the splitting of the units in two. So that's basically staff's interpretation as well. We feel that there is nothing that we can do to prevent the splitting of the semi-detached dwelling, and even if it is split, if the committee decides to approve this, it still remains a semi-detached dwelling, whether it's on one lot or the other. So that's my answer there.
Okay, let me, if I might, propose a hypothetical to you. So it splits, and say on part one, they want to build a deck or some accessory dwelling or attachment, such as a garage or something, and then it exceeds, say, the lot coverage. So they'll need a variance for that. Would they then need a variance to address the frontage issue? Because now the frontage would be on Charles Street. Is that a fair statement?
That's a good point. So it depends, but yes, I think that would be correct. If a further application were to come in, a variance may be required with that if there was further additions or anything to the semi-detached building.
Okay, so let me go one more further hypothetical. So if this application was approved, would each lot then be considered legal non-conforming?
I believe so, yes. Because the bylaw states that nothing shall prevent the splitting of them, I guess what it ends up with would be considered legal non-conforming in the definition of the front yard setback.
Okay. So with that being said, correct me, or if you can enlighten me with regards to lot coverage for the dwelling as including accessory buildings. Do we know what the lot coverage would be at this point? I'm just kind of going back to the shed issue. If the shed was to stay and the half of the dwelling that's on part one currently exceeds the lot coverage, you add the shed, so now you're over, would they then need a variance to keep the shed?
To To you, Mr. Chair, yes, if the accessory building is more than 10% lot coverage, then a variance would be required in order to keep it. But as Chris was mentioning, staff weren't aware of that shed's location in the application. I believe the shed was only located on the building permit drawing that isn't necessarily part of this application.
Okay, very good. I have nothing further. I believe that was the only delegation that wished to speak to this particular application. I don't know if any committee members have any further questions or comments to add. Donna?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if the applicants are there or not, but I remember when this came to us before and the applicants were speaking, that shed was mentioned, and we asked about it at that time, and I thought they told us the same thing they said today. They asked us, said they would leave it there to use it for storage while they were building, but it would be removed. It just came back to me when they said it again tonight. Now, I'm seeing Angie shaking her head. I remember that very distinctly, that it did come up because of this, and it was determined that it was just a shed from Canadian Tire type of thing, and that it would be all right for them to leave it until the buildings were completed. So just food for thought.
We can get it off,
It just
you know,
doesn't-
if it's a problem.
It doesn't matter.
I remember you speaking about it. Yes, I remember it.
So we have where to keep the tools and to keep materials while we work there, because people already stole materials from us, and we're in a site, you need somewhere to put stuff, right? Like a wheelbarrow or something, but we're not interested. Once the houses are up, it's not going to fit in this at all.
The design,
it's just all rusty and
very
it's all
ragged, yes.
Exactly. And I remember you explaining that to us last time, and that we thought that was a fair enough piece. And that's why I assumed it wasn't there, because they did say that they would take it down if need be. It wouldn't be part of the finished product. Anyway, just food for thought.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask the same question about that shed. Having said that, and listening to our planner, if at this stage, so to cut to the chase, through you to the planner, do we need to put that in as a condition, or are you telling us that the shed could stay, notwithstanding it wasn't on the application, and it doesn't, I'll say, contaminate the application? In other words, it could stay legally, or does that cause? I know, Mr. Chair, you'd asked a question about that. If it stayed, would it require a variance? Just want some clarity on that, if I could.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Staff honestly haven't looked at the size of the building or can determine on the fly if it needs a variance right now. Just looking at it, depending on the size of it, it really does make a difference whether we know how large it is or not. So if the committee chooses to add that as a condition that the shed be removed, that is the option there. Or somehow a condition could be worded to, I'm just trying to think, maybe staff can take a further look at it to determine if a variance is needed, but I think that would be a little bit more difficult. So I will leave it to the committee to decide if they would like to include that as a condition to remove the shed.
Thank you, David. I'd like to do that, and it sounds like the applicant's willing to do that. But I think in order to not delay this for the purposes of going back and measuring the shed, if the shed's going to be gone, it makes that point moot. So I would be prepared to add that as another condition. I see the applicant is nodding, so I'll be putting that forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, I seen your hand up.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to either David or Chris. In regards to a lot grading plan, I just want to confirm that will be done at the building process, correct? The building permit process, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Beauregard, yes, that is correct. Lot grading plans are a requirement at the building permit stage.
Okay.
So therefore, they should already be in place.
Pardon?
So therefore, it should already be in place. There's already a foundation on this property.
Oh, okay. Yes. I have no other questions at this time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Does the applicant have anything further to add at this point?
Simplify this. I mean, if it's easier for you guys, we're just gonna allow us to keep the shed for the next 6 months. And then as soon as we do the closing of the permit, you cannot close the permit until we remove the shed. I think there are other instruments in the building code that allow us to all kinds of conditions to be met before granting the occupancy or something like that. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what would entitle anything, but we just keep the shed from practical reasons. It's not going to be there for long. It's only going to be there just during the construction phase.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Worship, through you to one of our planners. Would the correct wording be, to the applicant's point, the applicant be required to remove the existing shed prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit?
I would say you could add that. My only concern is I don't know how long their construction's planning, and for them to be able to gain their severance, they have to have all conditions met within a year because it is a severance. So at this point, maybe it's not an issue, but I'm just thinking that say it came a year from now and they're not quite done and they don't have their occupancy permit yet, but basically everything's done. And if they don't get that occupancy permit, obviously then they can't.
Sorry to cut you off. We can make it sooner because as soon as the building is up, we don't need to store stuff outside anymore. We can store it inside.
Okay.
The reason I keep it out is only the foundation. There's no other room to stuff. But as soon as the framing goes up and the windows and doors, it's going to take a lot of time. So I will not need outside storage anymore. So in a matter of 2 or 3 months, it can be done. I mean, I'm a practical guy, so I don't need it for a year. I'm going to store stuff inside the house.
So Gary, to your point, we can make the removal of the shed a condition. So just to the owner, if that is a condition, that before you will be granted your severance, the shed would have to be removed. So, and you have up to a year to do that.
Okay, I'm not really familiar like how long the severance take and how that implicates for us when it comes to creating separate deeds or something. So we'll discuss further with the planning department, but we want to navigate this really swift because if we knew it was an issue, we would have taken down a long time ago. Yeah.
So like I said, it all depends on how quickly you want to actually sever. If your application was granted with that condition, the city would not accept the severance application, or it's not completely until that shed would be removed or that condition is met or any other condition that happens to be imposed. But you would have the approval and you'd have 1 year to make those conditions, to meet all of those conditions.
Okay, I thought we cannot move forward until the shed is gone. So we don't want to stall because of the shed.
Oh, no. You'd basically have your approval with conditions. So you just don't get your official blessing to split the lots until those conditions are met, at which time then you can do the finalization of the splitting of the lots at that point. But you have 1 year to meet all of those conditions and do that. Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? Not seeing any. Does anyone have a recommendation? Gary?
Thank you, Worship. Just before I do that, so if I'm correct on that, the shed could be removed within 1 year of today.
Yeah,
I'd like to tie it to a date or months or a year.
I would. Well, it has to be 1 year. There's no. To be able to meet the conditions of a severance, they have 1 year to meet those conditions. That is a requirement of the Planning Act. So if you just put that the shed has to be removed as a condition, then whenever time they deem to execute the removal of that shed, then they can go and finish off their severance. But until that shed is removed, they can't complete everything. It's approved from our standpoint, or would be approved from our standpoint. But until they meet that condition, they can't finalize the severance. And they have 1 year to meet those conditions to do that. So I don't
very good.
Very good.
I think before doing that, Member Beauregard has a question.
Yep, Eric.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Bruno. Just a recommendation would be to state in your condition that it be made to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. That's what I would recommend.
You don't mean building official or planning? The Director of Public Works?
Typically,
Planning.
in condition, you can do planning or director. Building permits are under the Director of Public Works, I believe. So typically, it would be to that director. In my experience with other municipalities.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, it would be the Planning and Development Department, but I don't think it's necessary to tie it to an authority to approve it. It would just be the building permit that approves the demolition permit for the shed.
Okay. So, Gary, were you good to proceed then with the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Respect to application B18-21-PC, and in the matter of the lands legally known as Lot 29 on Plan 768, municipally known as 664 King Street. Consent application B18-21-PC be granted subject to the following conditions. One, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds in triplicate for conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Two, the applicant to remove the existing shed. Three, that a final certification fee of $216 payable to the City of Port Colborne be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer.
Very good. Seconder to that? Angie, questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you. There is a 20-day waiting period for appeals to that, just so you know, to the owners. All right, thank you. And Mr. Secretary, the second application this evening, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our second application tonight is application number A32-21-PC. In the matter of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended in Section 6 of the City of Port Colborne Zoning Bylaw 6575-3018 as amended, and in the matter of the lands legally known as Part Lot 185 on Plan 797 in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, located in the second density residential zone municipally known as 700 Steele Street. And in the matter of an application by the agent Nancy Waters on behalf of the owner Club Castro Pignano for relief from the provisions of Zoning Bylaw 6575-3018 as amended under Section 45 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13, so as to permit the expansion of a legal non-conforming use. Planning staff has reviewed the referenced application and offered the following comments for the hearing. Notice was circulated to the public and required agencies on December 22nd, 2021, and as of today, the following has been received. There are no comments from the engineering department, and the drainage superintendent and the fire department also has no objection to the proposed application. Given the information in the planning staff report, planning staff recommend that application A32-21-PC be granted for the following reasons. One, it is minor in nature, as the requested variances are considered reasonable and measured requests. Two, it is appropriate for development of the site, as the proposal will not change the exterior or footprint of the building. Three, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the requirements listed in regard to the legal non-conforming uses are satisfied. And four, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as community facilities are permitted in the urban residential designation. And that concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. If you can bring in the applicant this evening, or the agent for the applicant. There we go. Good evening. Just before we get started, you don't wish to withdraw or defer your application this evening?
No, we don't.
Very good. Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
Not at this point. We're prepared to answer any questions, though.
Thank you. Is there any members of the committee that have any questions? Not seeing any. We do have a list of people that have requested to speak to this application. So with that, Chris or David, I'm not sure who's controlling who comes in or not, but if you can bring in the first requester. Good evening. Just before you get started, just your name and address for the record, and please try to limit your comments to 10 minutes.
Okay, so my name's Amanda, and my address is 694 Steel Street. So it's just across Highland Ave from 700 Steel Street.
Very good.
Okay, hope everybody's doing well. But I just had just a few concerns and questions. My first is the capacity limit. So what would be the capacity limit for this proposed club?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we believe our capacity limit is around 75 people.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I was also wondering if this address is going to be rented out to the public for events.
So Club Casa Manana was founded about 50 years ago, and we were in Port Robinson until January of this year. And then we looked at our business model and realized that that model that we were working under probably isn't going to be feasible going into the future. What we were in the past was a large wedding banquet venue, and we did hold big events. COVID changed all of that for us, and we decided to relook at our model and return to our roots. And our roots were a very small members club, and that's what we were founded on. And so what we are returning to is a small members club. Now, there will be events that will be open to our members. There will be some events open to the public. People can rent the space for bridal showers or baptisms or things like that. We're not in the wedding business, and we will not be preparing food on site. So that's going to change. That changes what we do there considerably from where we came from. We are just looking to return to a place where our members can gather. We'll be doing things like shuffleboard, card games, darts, that sort of a thing.
Right. Okay. I also have a concern about parking. I realize that there's not a whole lot of parking available to who would be your members. And I definitely have concerns about people parking like on my property. I realize the property line is 33 feet in from the center of the road, and I can't do anything about that, but I definitely have concerns about people crowding Highland Ave, especially with the amount of kids that we have there. That's definitely like probably one of my biggest concerns.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, with me is, I'm the business operations manager for Club Casa Champignon, but with me tonight is Riley DeVoli, and he's one of our executive members. And Riley is a contractor here in Niagara, and he will be overseeing the renovations that we have to do inside the building. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to let Mr. DeVoli speak to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. So in terms of parking on our property, if you look at the site plan here on the west side of the building, we have a set.
Oh, your microphone.
Pardon me? Our mic's off?
Your microphone was fading out.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Just if you got to just stay a little bit closer to your computer,
Okay.
Otherwise your microphone will fade out.
So with reference to the site control plan or the site plan we submitted, on the west side of the building, there's a 5.8 meter setback to the property line. So according to section 3.2, standard parking space is 2.6 meters wide and 5.2 meters long. So there's 4 parking spots in tandem there. And then along the front of the property on Highland, where it's that shoulder where beside the sidewalk, I understand it's public property, but there's enough parking for another 6 cars there. So to meet the requirements, we thought we'd be comfortable with 10 cars in there, and we'd dedicate one of the spots to handicap as required. And we don't foresee having a ton of vehicle traffic in there. And I don't know exactly what the church had in the past, but they had a higher capacity than us, and they seemed to make it work with parking. So we weren't overly concerned, but we definitely would be diligent not to crowd your property.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that so much. And then another concern I had is, are you guys going to be applying for permits for like alcohol consumption and serving? Because I have just a few concerns with that. Just given the amount of kids in the area, there's a crossing guard that's staffed there 3 times a day. Like this is a huge family-oriented community, and I just worry about potential and intoxicated drivers, impaired drivers, and the kids running around playing all the time in the street and everything on Highland Ave. So that's another concern I have.
Certainly. So again, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we will be making application to the AGCO for a liquor permit. We will be serving and selling alcohol at events. That is part of what we will be doing. Our events, though, won't be taking place during the daytime. We'll be having events usually in the evenings or on like on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. But we're not a dance club. We're not a bar. We're not going to be a place where people are going to be coming there to party or anything like that. We will have to follow all the rules of the AGCO, and all of our staff will be smart served. We've been in this business for 50 years, so we certainly know the risks around not letting any of our patrons ever leave if they've been drinking too much. We would be following all the smart serve guidelines. But to that, we wouldn't be having people there during the daytime. That certainly wouldn't be during school hours or anything like that. Even our office will be off site. So it's not going to be an occupied building during the daytime, but in the evenings and possibly like on a Sunday afternoon or something like that, yes, there will be somebody in there for small events, member gatherings, meetings, that sort of thing. And yes, we will be making application to the AGCO.
Okay, perfect. And then I think I just have one more, sorry. How often are you guys, like if you have any kind of rough estimate as to how often you would be holding events there? Is this on a weekly basis, a monthly basis?
I would think a few times a month.
Okay. I think that's everything that I had. So thank you for that. I'm done now.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Amanda, you are certainly welcome to reach out to us at any time if you have any questions. We're all very accessible. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, we have a website. You can call us at any time if there's ever any concerns. You can call me directly, and we will address if there is any. Certainly, if there's parking concerns on the street.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris or David, the next requester, please.
I have asked Ms. Hiermeyer to join the meeting, but I'm not sure if she sees that. We could move on to the next person for now, and maybe we'll loop back to her after.
Sounds good. I'm guessing you brought in Miss Teasdale.
Yes, that's correct.
Looks like she might have stepped away from her computer. Can you maybe bump her back to the lobby there and pull someone else in?
Yes, we'll move on to the next person for now.
All right, can everybody hear me?
We can.
Wonderful.
Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, so my name's Jesse Morin. I live at 708 Steel Street. So I have 6 windows facing the proposed property. I'm next door neighbors. I am right beside the building. So yeah, so I guess my am I allowed just to jump right into it? Sorry, this is new to me.
Go right ahead. You have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah, it was I guess mostly just question asking. This is very, very new. I just moved here to Port Colborne a year ago. Never owned a house before. And I'm just going to kind of echo some of the previous concerns. Because I live right beside. I know we're not necessarily supposed to discuss intent of the building, but you know, we always have concern when there's a lot of traffic in an area, and I've got a 9-month-old baby and a 4-year-old daughter that play like that's my driveway right there. You know, and we talk about you know, the number of you know, parking spots, like, you know, parking on the street, and Steel Street, the street I'm on, is already very busy. And so I guess my questions, not that I want to have a loaded question, but just I guess the intent behind it, and to debate some of my fears as a dad that is also trying to get his kids to sleep. I know you mentioned that it would not be during school hours, and my kids go to bed at 6:30, which is not anybody else's problem but my own. But you know, on weekends and evenings, you know, if it's gonna be loud and things like that, and you know, rent it out to other people, and I know alcohol could potentially be served there. These are just some of my just base concerns as a dad and as a next door neighbor. So that's I guess where I'd like to start off.
Okay, well, it's nice to meet you, Jesse. I think I saw you yesterday when I was grabbing the mail there. So again, just to introduce myself, my name is Nancy Waters. I'm the business operations manager, and Riley DeVoli is overseeing some of our renovations, and he's an executive member here. So we're a not-for-profit. We've been in business for almost 50 years. We've been in this business a long time, and COVID changed our business model. And we have now downsized considerably from basically a 20,000 square foot building where we could house 500 people to probably less than 70 people. So your concerns are our concerns as well. We share those exact same concerns. And we've started to take some of the paneling and things down that were inside the church as a church building. What our plan is on both sides of the building, we will be doing extensive soundproofing. You did mention renting it out. We don't rent out our building to, like, strangers aren't coming in to have stag and does or things like that. That's not the kind of business that we are. We're a members club. So will there be events past 6:30 at night? Yes, unfortunately there will be. But it is our intent and our plan as we move forward with our renovations, if this variance is approved, to make sure that building is perfectly soundproof, because we are a family-oriented club. The average age of our members is about 62 years of age. So we're certainly not going to be having rock bands or anything like that in there. That's not going to be happening. I will be in attendance at pretty much every function, as will our bar manager. We will be ensuring that we are not infringing on any of our neighbors, you know, right to a nice quiet home. We want to be good corporate citizens. We want to be good community members. We're excited to be part of the Port Colborne community, and we are aware that there's families all the way around us, and so we will be working to make sure that we work with you guys. But yes, soundproofing is going to happen. I can let Riley discuss that because I'm not the contractor, but I will let Riley address that.
Yeah, we're currently working with a local architect, and our hopes are that if the variance does get approved, that we're able to maybe remove some of the glazing abutting your property. Now, you're on the north side of the property, I assume. Yeah, so that's correct. Yes, there is some building requirements in terms of how much glass is required in a building. So we will have to adhere to those, but our intentions were to hopefully remove all of those and fur out the wall, which means basically make it thicker for soundproofing. That'll be detailed through the architect though, but we do have plans. And like Nancy said, we're a family-oriented club, and it's not a party scene. There's not going to be 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. events with people out screaming, hooting, and hollering. Our Christmas party this year ended at 10:30, and that was everyone cleaned up and gone.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like most of the other things I would want to bring up and discuss may not be necessarily this isn't maybe necessarily the right venue for it, but Nancy, and invite the opportunity to meet outside of this to just discuss going forward. But yeah, again, just for I guess the final question I have, and I don't know if anybody can answer this, was because I don't know anything about zoning whatsoever. With this change, does that change the usage of the property? Let's say if it changes hands again, is this another discussion that happens again, or is it always going to be like a general purpose kind of zoning?
So if I might, and Chris or David, if I say something wrong, please correct me. But basically, so they're asking, it was a church, which was a legal non-conforming use. I believe it's zoned residential. So if that legal non-conforming use ceases, then it would revert back to a residential property. So their request is to go to a club. So unless if they did sell it, it would have to be a club type basis. If they wanted to do something else in there, I think even if it wanted to go back to being a church again, it would then have to go through the same process again. So it's very specific to what their ask is, and that's what it would be converted to at this point. So if it did change, or they even wanted to change it to something else, then certainly they would have to come back for a change in the use of the property. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'll wrap it up there. Again, just thank you for your time. And the only thing I can say is if it does go through, hopefully things go well. Again, it is a very, very residential area. Everybody knows that. Lots of kids. So again, my concerns are still there. We don't know what the future is, but thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Gary, just before we bring in the next person, you had your hand up.
Mr. Chair, it may not be appropriate, just spinning off Mr. Morin's point in the contractor. Notwithstanding, I understand that you need to have a specific amount of glaze or glass on that building, but that's not required in particular areas. It's a percentage, is it not?
Yes, I believe it is. But if we were to remove all the glazing from the exterior of the window, we might, be under our percentage or our requirements. So we're just going to be diligent about that going forward. And like I said, we're working with an architect, so hopefully they can plan all that out for us, just to be within our bylaws.
I wanted to ask you if you can meet that percentage, but the wall abutting Mr. Moran's property could be solid, and the glazing put on other windows. I mean, after all, he's the only
Yes.
neighbor on that side. You have the two streets on the other part of the corner. Would you entertain doing that for the applicant so that there is no glazing on that north side?
Absolutely. That's our plan, to be honest. Like we said, we weren't sure if we were going to meet the requirements for minimum glazing. So ideally, we will be able to make that wall thicker and have nothing exposed to his property.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, David or Chris, if we got someone else that's sitting in the waiting room to bring them in, please.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chair. How are you?
Not too bad. Yourself? Just your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Brent Person. My family and I live at 145 Highland Avenue, just east of the church. Some of our concerns have already been addressed a little bit. Parking is definitely the big one for us, for sure. We don't oppose it. My wife's family has been a member of the club in the years past, and we've never had a problem. We've been to lots of events at Club Castagnano. Very enjoyable. But parking is a concern. We've been here 16 years, and on a rainy Sunday morning, Amanda's grass, who lives across kitty corner from us, does get wrecked up. There's no doubt it happens, even with the 7 or 8 cars that were there with the church people. So I think she has valid concerns with her parking concerns, like everybody else does. If it holds 75 people, we could have an average of 40 cars in the neighborhood, and they're going to be fairly close by. There is the 6 spots out front you referred to. I've never seen 6 cars fit in that spot in 16 years. Not to say it can't happen, but they're going to encroach probably on the sidewalk that is there. Even this week, there was a few cars parked out front, and they park right across that sidewalk. We do have the kids and the elderly in the area who do use the area. And so we have some concerns with parking for sure. And I know you've made your comments, and we understand them. And again, we're not opposing, we're just voicing our opinion. What else do we have here? You mentioned some events. It's going to be more of a club than a hall per se. And, you did mention renting out to club members, and there'll be stag and does for those events, correct?
No.
Okay.
Nope. So through you, Mr. Chair, we are not renting the hall out to anybody. The events will be run by us. If somebody comes to us and says, can I have my bridal shower there on a Sunday afternoon?
Correct.
We run the event. We're there, we're on staff, we're there. We will never rent the hall out and leave it in somebody else's hands. That's not going to happen.
Okay.
So no, there will be no stag and does. We didn't have stag and does at our other locations, so we certainly aren't going to have them here.
No, it was a big hall. It was more wedding, but
yeah, no, that's certainly not the intent. That is not what our business model is. That's not our mission at all. Yes, I understand the parking concerns, and we share those concerns, and we will, as I said, we will always be on staff. We will always be there for every event.
Sure.
And we will make sure that there is nobody parking on Amanda's grass or parking across sidewalks that make it, unsafe for elderly or children people to walk.
But there are not enough parking spots on Steel Street for the people that live in the homes and the amount of cars that are in every individual driveway. For example, we have 3 trucks. We have 2 in our driveway and 1 in front of our house on Highland. And I don't know where you think that a hall that will potentially have 40 to 70 people in it, let's say 2 people per car, 35 cars. I don't understand where an event is going to be able to park all these vehicles on Highland, encroaching in front of people's homes and parking spots, on Steel Street, encroaching on an already busy road. It is going to be a concern for sure. I welcome the community with Castagnano when I thought that it was going to be relatively small, maybe a little catering service or something like that. But hosting facilities around with parking, that has always been my biggest concern with anything that's going to happen there. When it was going to possibly be a residential duplex or something, I thought that was adequate because it would actually contain 2 to 3 parking spots that are on the property and contain the people who would rent from that property. Now that it could become a club or a potential business, and don't knock it, we love the gnocchi, we came to the fish fries. My family grew up with Castagnano. My grandfather originally helped build it. I am an Alfieri by maiden name, so I know of the good people of Club Castagnano. I am not against it. I just want to make sure that my family, because I don't plan to move, I'm directly across from the face of the church. I want to make sure that our concerns are valid and that we aren't going to come home and find our parking spots are used up for other people and that we're not inconvenienced as well.
Okay. So again, through you, Mr. Chair, we certainly have other options for parking other than on Steele Street. I mean, I don't think many people are going to park on Steele Street. There probably will be parking on Highland, and we understand that that's where people are going to park. They won't be there. We're not going to have people park there for 10 or 12 hours. We're talking an hour or two window. As I say, we won't be encroaching during school hours or during most of the time during regular business hours. So it will be in the evenings. I don't know whether people will attempt to, park in the school parking lot down the street, or if they'll go further down to the side streets on the other side of Highland. We don't know where people are going to park, but what we can do is assure you that when we have events that, we make sure everybody is well aware, because we know our members. We have a very small membership base. We will just make sure everybody is not parking, certainly not on anybody's grass. We're not going to condone somebody parking across a driveway and making it impossible for you to get into your own driveway. We've been very good corporate citizens for 50 years. We all live in this area. We all have homes and families here too. None of us would be that disrespectful.
That is good to hear. Those were my concerns for sure. And also just to reiterate, like the catering part of it or the food part of it, are you planning to cook on site? Are there still going to be events held like we used to come down and buy gnocchi night or lasagna or the fish? Are those still your intentions to happen? Because it was such a beautiful event when it was in Port Robinson.
So I'm glad that you liked our food, but thank you. For you again, Mr. Chair. We probably will not be doing much cooking on site. We hope to have a third-party caterer come in and still run the occasional gnocchi night. But the way we ran our takeout business and our eat-in business at the old location is not the way we'll be doing it here. We don't have the space for a big kitchen, and we're not looking to get into a catering business again. These would be very small events where we would work directly with a caterer. They bring the food in, plate it, serve it, and wash dishes and all the rest of it. We've really had to take a big step back from our old business model. COVID changed the game for us, and we've decided that there's just too many niche venues out there for people to go to have their weddings and have their events. And so we are returning to our roots, and this will be a members club, and we welcome you to come back at any time. And as we have events, we will certainly make sure that our neighbors are aware of them well in advance. And we did that at our old location as well. We brought flyers around and made sure that the community of Port Robinson was well aware of what was happening. As I said, we've been good corporate neighbors in the city of Thorold for almost 50 years. All of us we all live in Niagara. We all have family. We all own homes. We are certainly going to be very respectful of our neighbors. We knew that going into this, that we were going into a residential neighborhood. And I can give you my word, I will be on site. You can contact me anytime. I will share my phone number with all the neighbors. You can call me anytime if there's an issue.
Okay.
Yes, that I feel good about that. I welcome you. I think that it's time to move forward, and I think it'll be a good union as long as we all keep open. And I would be one of those people that would be very grateful to have your name, so that if there are any concerns and my fellow neighbors have any concerns, that we could just honestly reach out to you. That would be very appreciative. I wish you well.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know if it's possible for you to share my contact information, the club phone number with the delegates, but they're certainly more than welcome to contact me at any time.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all we have.
Thank you. Chris or David, whoever, I don't know if you caught everyone originally, but if we missed some that are there now that we can bring in.
trying to ask Joanne Heemauer to join the meeting again, but does not seem to be working.
And I'm assuming Miss Teasdale's not there either.
I will try Miss Teasdale right now.
Hello.
There we go. Good evening. Just for the record, just if you can state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
It's Sherry Teasdale, and I'm 130 Knoll Street, so I'm directly behind the church. And my garage is actually on, I guess, Highland. It's not really Highland, but yes. And I have the same issue that it's the parking with where everyone's going to park. Like I said, my garage is actually on Highland Street, and they would be parking it all in my area.
Okay. So through you, Mr. Chair, again, what we are proposing is that when we have events, we will be cognizant of reminding people who either purchase tickets to events, or if we are having a members only event, that we have full contact with these people before they arrive. We know that they're coming. We will just ensure that everybody is not parking where they're not supposed to be, and they're not blocking driveways, they're not making it impossible for people to use the sidewalks. As I said, I will be on staff. Our bar manager is always on staff. What we can certainly do is take a walk around, and if we see cars parked where they shouldn't be, we will move them. I guess the beauty is that because we're always going to be there, we can be very cognizant of those things. We're not renting it out to somebody else to use the building. So us being on site makes us very accountable.
Again, but I've been here 22 years, and the church was, I was here during the church. There was lucky if there was 3 cars. There's no place really to park. Like when you go to park, even before they put the sidewalk in, you could parallel park towards the church. It was fine. You can get lots of cars in there. Now you're not going to be able to. So now it's going to clog that whole street that's not even a street, like Highland, right in that little section there, and then nobody's going to be able to move. So if you park cars on both sides, there's not going to be any room for it, like to back up to do anything. That's the major concern, is the parking. And if not, they're going to all park on Knoll Street. So that's the only concern I have, is the parking. And I do have 2 kids, and, you know, we've been here, like I said, 22 years. So that's my biggest concern, is there's not going to be a place to park for even like 30 cars.
I think we can explore the idea of removing some of the green space in front of the building to add a supplementary parking to our building itself. And I think we should explore the possibility of using the school. I don't know how that would work, but we could definitely look into it, of having people park there and walk down. We don't anticipate having 30 or 40 cars. They're small events. We expect the space to hold 70, but it doesn't mean we're going to have 70 people in there.
And as I said, our average age of our members is about 62. And so that being said, these are not going to be late events. These are not going to be loud events. These are not going to be events where we're going to be having people drunk out on the sidewalks. They're going to come, they're going to play cards, they're going to listen to some Italian music, and then go home. Like, the parking is not going to be a permanent issue 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's going to be a couple of times a month. And because we are going to be on site, we will be accountable to that. And we will make sure that if we see people parking where it's blocking someone's driveway, or possibly, you know, parking on someone's grass, we'll tell them to move their car. I mean, I know that maybe the church wasn't as busy of a place, but we certainly are cognizant that the parking is going to be a problem, and we are prepared to work with the neighbors.
Okay.
If I might, to maybe try to address all of the neighbors' concerns, is maybe once your renovations have been completed, maybe you can have an open house for the neighborhood, bring them all in, and maybe prior to that, have some kind of designated areas around the immediate area. If the parking lot where the old school was is a provision, maybe you can kind of address, see how many car spots could be there. point this out to your members because they may not be aware that just down the street a little bit and over to the right, there's a fairly large parking lot that's usually accessible. I'm not sure about in the winter, but that might be something that if there was when you have your open house, you have it laid out and say, okay, here's areas here, be cognizant of these areas here. And maybe that will help some of the neighbors with their concerns about parking as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's a great idea.
Is there anything further, Ms. Teasdale?
No, that was it. Just the parking.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I don't know if there's anyone left there that we can try to bring in. If not, we will call it for public input.
I'm just trying Joanne Heemeyer again one more time. If you'd like to join, I think there should be a pop-up to click to join the meeting. Not looking like it, Mr. Chair.
All right. So does that cover everyone that wished to speak to it, that we can get into the meeting?
Yes, that's correct. There aren't any more that are on the meeting that have registered.
Okay, very good. So with that, committee members, Gary, have you any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Chris or David. David, I know the church was a grandfathered use there. It's a residential neighborhood, but we get lots of applications, both citywide or committee of adjustment wide, that speaks to the parking when it relates to change of zoning, or when it relates to a use within the permitted zoning. I'm thinking more and more lots that are made into townhouses, semis that were single. And so with respect to this use, and for that matter, the previous church use, are there parking requirements for halls, churches, etc.? If you could speak to that overarching issue.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Bruno. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but just one note to the committee. Because this is a legal non-conforming property, that also means that the parking that currently exists is also legal non-conforming. So regardless if it is under the parking requirement, there's not really anything that planning staff can do to make them meet that parking requirement because it's already legal non-conforming. I'm just going to pull up the typical parking requirement for a hall. So I don't see one for a social club or hall. We do have one for a place of worship, which is minimum one space per every 20 square meters of gross floor area. And then also a section that covers any other non-residential uses listed in the bylaw, which would be the same, minimum one space per 20 square meters of gross floor area.
Thank you, David. Maybe we should have started with that whole foundation before the presenters, but appreciate the response. Through you to the applicant. Nancy, certainly you can see by some of the neighbors who are aware of the club's history and of the quality and that they brought, whether they were in Port Robinson, and many of the members are Port Colborne residents. And I believe you'll do your utmost to do the best job. My concern is that if you went out and bought a building and you're coming for this, that perhaps it might have been better to have looked into that first, or made your purchase conditional upon it, but that's water under the bridge. The concern I share with neighbors, and I think you're very fortunate that because of your reputation, you've had people come forward who have a great concern about the parking, and yet they're still willing to work with you, and that's admirable. The issue, of course, is that Nancy's not going to be there forever, and neither will some of the members that are there today. And this is about land use planning and what could come after a good operator is there. So I don't know if, perhaps one of the projects, and I'm not suggesting you have to do this, but is there any thought of over time with your fundraising and that to ever look at purchasing what would amount to extra parking as a project?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Bruno. Honestly, I think that's the first time I've thought about that. We would probably love to purchase space if it became available that we could use for additional parking. But let's be honest, I mean, I can't control what's going to happen 10 years
Sure.
or 5 years from now. Maybe nothing would come available around us that we could purchase. And so it's a great idea. I can't guarantee it's going to work, though. I can't guarantee that anybody's going to sell a piece of property that we could then knock down an existing home to put parking. I'm not necessarily sure that's even the best thing as a corporate neighbor to take away housing in a market like the one that we're in. But to that effect, I'm going to just say that, yes, we are lucky that we have an impeccable reputation, and we left a really good reputation behind in Thorold, and we intend to remain good corporate neighbors and a good community partner. And we will take everybody's concerns extremely seriously. I will be on site. Somebody will always be on site from the club, somebody who will be responsible because of the Liquor License Act. I can't just have anybody in there. So, if there are problems, I will address them. And that is the guarantee that I can give you. And I'm basing it on the reputation of Club Castropignano. Yeah, sure. If a property came up for sale nearby that we could use for parking, definitely.
Great, thank you. Through you to David or Chris, with respect to parking restrictions on municipal streets, I take it that's something that would be or could be petitioned by neighbors or brought forward by council to work at kind of the here to corner signage, one side of the road, those things. I just want to leave the neighbors with their, if there is excess and poor parking practices, they would have to be addressed separately through bylaw. I'm not sure if you can answer that, David or Chris.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Bruno, I believe so. If there are certain requests for no parking signs or limits or time limit parking, that would have to come through to council, and then it would be bylaw enforcement preparing a report on that.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Eric, I've seen your hand up.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, to David. Isn't there, in some courses I've taken regarding this, is there not an ability to create a condition where you have payment in lieu of parking, whereby the municipality we can make a condition that they pay a certain fee, and that fee then goes into a what do you call it? An account with the city that would then be used for parking purposes in the future. Is that not an option to the committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that is an option under the Planning Act. However, we would have to have a subsequent policy in our official plan for that to be an option we take, and I do not believe we have such policy. I know we have payment in lieu for parkland and things like that, but I don't believe we have anything for parking.
Okay. And isn't there something similar where it could be made like a condition where they need to find, like the applicant would have to find maybe a private source of, as like an extra source of parking? Do you know what I'm referring to?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Member Bruno, could you, Member Beauregard, could you just clarify a little bit for that? Phrase it.
For example, where an applicant, we can make a condition where the applicant must find a parking location, whether through a private deal, like make a private contract with another person to then provide parking, and that be made a condition. I just recall reading about this. Unfortunately, I don't have it at my disposal right now. So, but I'm just wondering if you have knowledge of this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe it would be possible. However, I don't think I would actually recommend that to the committee. There would be option, just looking at the aerial imagery of the property, and I think Nancy or sorry, I forget your name.
Riley.
I think you might have mentioned that there is an option to possibly pave a little bit further to have some more parking along the side of the building. I think if the committee were to add a condition to this, I think that would be suitable. If the parking is a concern to the committee still, that potentially that little bit further paving is done you could put probably 6 or 7 parking spaces there that would fit and not block the sidewalk in any way. I think that would maybe alleviate some of these concerns.
Okay. I'll keep that as a note. My only concern about that is that when looking at the portion of the property that is along Highland Avenue, I'm looking at Niagara Navigator, and that seems to be a municipal boulevard. The actual property line of the applicant ends at, I just got to pull it up, ends at the green space. So I'm not sure.
So we may be able to utilize angled parking in order to use that green space. From the building to our property line is 3.962 meters, and a parking space is required to be 5.2. So I think we could squeak it in there, and even if we added 5 with our additional parking in tandem, if you go by the 1 parking space per 20 square meters, we would be required to have 8, and we would have it there.
David, do you agree with that? Can you confirm?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that would be correct. I think one thing to note to the committee is that the parking or the paving of that boulevard, I'm not sure when that was put in, but that would also be sort of a grandfathered in scenario, right? Not to say that the city would necessarily approve something like that nowadays, but it is existing and it has been used for parking in the past. So I don't think we would, as a municipality, take that away from them. So I think the angled parking could be an option there that could be explored.
Okay. And then just a couple of questions in regards to the actual 4 tests that are in the planning report, particularly where we ask, is the application minor in nature? I believe it was Chris who prepared this report. The third sentence, it says there is little to no change in how the property will operate. Can you maybe bring some sort of clarity to that sentence?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Beauregard. What it generally means there is that the The use prior, as the church did also operate as a bit of an event space, you were able to also rent that space out as events, to use as events, sorry. And it sort of operated a little bit similar to, obviously not the same, but to the use that is proposed here. So that was kind of what the intent was behind that.
Okay. And then my last question is in regard to the third prong of the test, where is it in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The last sentence says the proposal does not increase the height, size, volume, or extent of nonconformity of the building on the property. Can you clarify how it meets the extent portion of that sentence?
Right, through you, Mr. Chair. So that section basically just means that the building currently doesn't conform to the bylaw requirements, and further after this application, it will not further non-conform, if that makes any sense to you. There will be no.
Are you referring to the?
Yeah.
Sorry, are you referring to the structure itself?
Yes, in that case, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that I understand. Yes. That's all my questions. Thank you.
I guess, Eric, if I might, to that last point, if we were to make a condition that the applicant tried to explore expanding as much on-site parking as possible, technically would be expanding the non-conforming use, because you're going to be adding more parking spots on the property. However, that the intent is to try to alleviate another issue. I guess to me, when it was a church, although the people that went there was only a few cars, that's not to say that it couldn't have been as many people as is capable now. I don't know what the capacity limit was when it went as a church versus what the capacity limit is now. I guess just for the sake of the church goers dwindling over time, doesn't necessarily mean it could have went the other way either, and you could have been flooded there every Sunday and Friday and Saturday and midnight mass and the whole 9 yards, depending upon what type of church and establishment. So I guess that goes to the keeping in with the general intent and zoning, where we're not making it necessarily worse. We're trying to make sure it doesn't get more than it could have been. But the fact that it wasn't maybe used to its fullest capacity before shouldn't be a driver in that particular case, I guess. So with that, does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Does the applicant wish to make any final? Sorry, Donna, did you raise your hand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say to Nancy and Riley, I'm really impressed with you guys have put together. I've been to your club many times. I have seen lots of events there. I understand the downsizing, what you're hoping to do here. I understand the concerns with the parking. We've lived in places where we were worried about that as well. But I'm very confident that you guys will figure this out and work with the neighbors. And I think you already have good relationships established with them. And if you do the things that have been suggested, having an open house and doing different things and just being there, talking with them, I think you'll figure this out. I love Riley's idea of the parallel parking there. I think that it'll come together, and you have to move forward and try things. And I think that this is a great piece to bring into that neighborhood, because it is a family-oriented type of a club. So I just want to say to you guys, bravo. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, if there's no other comments to the applicant, if you have anything further you'd like to add at this time before we...
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to your last point, my understanding that the church capacity was about 100 people. We are not going to have that capacity for our liquor license. We definitely will not have that capacity. The difference is there were pews where people were jammed in, 8 or 9 people in a pew. We will have other things taking up space in the event area. So we aren't going to have that kind of capacity. And we agree that just because that church had dwindling numbers doesn't mean that that there wouldn't have been parking issues if people had gone to church there on a more regular basis. And that, we are prepared to do what we have to do to work with the community around us, because we're pretty happy to be in Port Colborne right now. So we will give you our word. We will be great corporate neighbors. We'll be great partners with this city, and we're looking forward to being here.
Super, thank you. So with that, does anyone have a recommendation? Nobody? All right, I'll move application A3221 PC in the matter of the lot legally known as part lot 185 of plan 797, municipally known as 700 Steel Street. That minor variance application A3221 PC be granted for the following reasons that were outlined in the staff report dated January 7th, 2022. One, that it's minor in nature, as the requested variances are considered reasonable and measured requests. Two, appropriate for the development of the site, as the proposal will not change the exterior or footprint of the building. Three, desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the requirements listed in regard to the legal nonconforming uses are satisfied. Four, desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as community facilities are permitted in the urban residential boundary. I would also like to add a condition that all potential avenues of expanding on-site parking be explored within the provisions and suitable to the planning department or director of planning. So with that, I'll look for a seconder. Gary, any questions or comments? Not seeing any. Oh, Eric.
One question through you, Mr. Chair, to David. How long has this been a non-conforming use?
I'm not aware of the year exactly, but I know it's been prior to the former zoning bylaw. Chris is suggesting the 1920s. I'm not sure if it's that old, but it was prior to 1982, which was the passing of our former bylaw, which anything that was in existence prior to that is deemed to be a legal non-conforming use.
Okay, because it's just my understanding that legal non-conforming uses, although they exist, they're eventually supposed to go. They are eventually to conform over time. So if it's 80, 90 years, that's quite a long time to be legal non-conforming. So I'm not sure if you have a comment to that or not.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think, that's a good question. I think the intention is that the legal non-conforming use is changing. It's still meeting the criteria in the zoning bylaw to not negatively impact the area further than what it already is. But yes, if a further owner does come in and decide to convert this back to residential, which is what the zoning bylaw is looking for, then that would be the avenue at that time. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yes, legal non-conforming uses are supposed to eventually cease, but I don't have the date of when this is established or how long it's been in existence, or have a timeline for when that is supposed to cease or anything like that. So it's all subjective.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Thank you. There's a 20-day waiting period, but other than that, good to go.
Mr. Chair and members of council, thank you so much. We welcome you to Club Pastor Pignano.
Thank you. All right. Just to kind of wrap things up, is there any other business? Eric?
Quick question through you to David. Do we ever ask that that applicants provide a letter or planning brief or planning report addressing the tests? Or because typically in our experience, I haven't really seen too many planning justification reports or even a planning brief from applicants that come before us.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that does sometimes come out at a pre-con meeting. To be honest, when planning staff reviewed this one, the proposed use is very similar to what is existing, which is why we didn't find that it warranted any planning justification reports or briefs. But certainly, if it's a more controversial application, I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but controversial applications do warrant planning justification reports occasionally. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other business? Not seeing any. Just before we move on, just for those, your OACA membership would have had to be renewed if you haven't done it. I got an email last week, so I've just taken care of that. And I think it was mentioned that Eric, you had looked after yours already. So just a reminder, if you're wanting to maintain that, to look into that. So with that, can I find a mover and a seconder for the minutes from our last meeting? Angie, Eric, any questions or comments? All in favor? That'll be carried. So with that, I will mark this meeting as adjourned. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your month.
You as well.